Good evening. We are live. Welcome to the Smart Elections Election Protection Forum. I am Lulu Friesdat. I am the Executive Director of Smart Elections. And here with me is Lisa Dennett. She is our American Sign Language interpreter. And we're incredibly grateful to her for joining us this evening. I think I even have a banner with her name. There we go. This is Lisa Dennett. This is the first time that we've had an ASL interpreter, and we're really pleased to be moving in this direction and making the forum more accessible and inviting more people in and making more people feel welcome. And hopefully we'll be able to continue this. I'll talk to you later about what might make that possible. We might ask you for a little funding to help that happen, but that's a little bit down the road. But for right now, we're just incredibly grateful for Lisa to be here. And we're going to get started. Our program today is really moving and really important to me that we're doing this. We are going to be hearing stories of voters with disabilities, their history, their past, their present, what they've been through, how they feel now, and both the triumphs and the challenges that they've had when voting. And I just want to give a little bit of information for people who might be joining us for the first time. So we are Smart Elections, and we are a project dedicated to elevating election reform to an urgent national priority. We are trying to transform our elections into a process that voters have confidence in, that is well-run, accessible, secure, and accurate, and can be publicly verified. These are some of our top priorities, and I know that they're some of your top priorities too, and that's why we're really glad that you're here with us. If you want to find out more about us, you're going to go to our website, that's smartelections.us, and if you want to reach out and contact us, our email is contact@smartelections.us, and we do love to hear from you. A lot of times we get emails after the forum, just telling us what you really liked about it, if you learned things, if you found it fascinating, exciting, in anything like it was a new experience, or you particularly cared for the story of a guest. We love to get those emails, and we usually do put them in our newsletter and let people know that you're having a good experience. And we also really want to hear from you if there's things that you don't like and you want changed, or you have ideas about improvements or topics you want us to cover, right? Whatever. I'm really loving watching Lisa because she's very expressive. So totally dig that. So go ahead and do reach out to us. We really appreciate it. And the best way really for you to stay in touch with us is to sign up for our mailing list, because then you're going to get information on a regular basis about our forums, about our programs, about public oversight projects that we're doing, about information that we think is really important. Sometimes there's other forums that come up and we want you to know about them, articles. We send all kinds of information in those newsletters. So the way you do that, again, is on our website, smartelections.us. You're just going to go there and look for sign our mailing list. It's right there on the front page. So I think those are our basics. I'm guessing that our co-host Bennie Smith is here now. Yeah, there he is. Okay, so let's get Bennie on and say hello. Hey, Bennie.
Hi, everybody. I was here at 6 o'clock. I was just watching the sign language.
I must not have seen you down in the other banner. I'm so sorry. So how are you doing?
You was looking at the sign language. That's okay. I can get bumped for that.
Can I get more light on your face? You know how I love it.
Yeah, I'm gonna work on that in a second.
Yeah. all your jokes. I have to really be able to see them land.
Yeah, I'm gonna work on that in a second.
Okay, I take it that you are still our Washington correspondent?
I am. I'm still reporting from Washington, yeah. I'm still here. Still working on it.
Okay. So, and there's Bennie's Twitter handle. I forgot to say, if you want to follow us on Twitter, it's @BennieJ Smith, and my Twitter handle is @Lulu Friesdat. So it's not hard to keep in touch with us. There's lots of ways to do it. And I think with that, we're going to move right on, and we're going to bring on our first guest. So our first guest is Terence Page, and I'm really excited to introduce him to you. So here we go. Let's add Terence in. And Terence, wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, Lulu. I appreciate it.
Oh. So Terence is president of the Greater New York Council of the Blind, and he's incredibly active. I'm just amazed. He does as much or more than I do, and he does it without seeing. So it's really, really impressive. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about his stories, the things that he's been through, both voting and otherwise. So Terence, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself now, about what you do, and what your life is like now. I think that would be really great for people to hear.
Thank you. As she said, I'm Terence Page, president of the Greater New York Council of the Blind. I was born born legally blind with correctable vision, and then later on, I began to have glaucoma issues, which led to my current vision loss, which fluctuates between acceptable vision and almost none at all. So that's my vision, which led me to become motivated and join ACB. And 7 years later, I'm the president.
And ACB is the American Council of the Blind.
Yes, the American Council of the Blind. I am the president of the Greater New York Council of the Blind, which encompasses all 5 boroughs and the outer areas of New York City.
And one of the things that I think was really, really important for me to hear in my journey, learning more about the voting process, was your experience starting, I think you said in 2004, the first time that you tried to vote, and that you had to have assistance voting, and kind of what that experience was like for you.
Thank you. When I first tried to vote, my vision had changed so dramatically I couldn't read print. So I asked a friend of mine, aka a landlord, to go with me to the polling place. When I went to the polling place to vote, he went in to fill out my ballot. Little did I know he was a diehard Republican. At the time, I was voting in Long Island, and Long Island hadn't nominated a Democrat in 105 years in almost any major office. So as I filled out as he filled out my ballot sheet, and he was running through, and he went through all the offices and marked them, and he was handing them in to the poll worker for them to be checked. She said, "You haven't finished your marking all the ballot spaces." And then my friend, without asking me, said, "Yeah, he's finished." And she said, "No, he's not." And he's filled out everything he needs to be checked out. And an argument ensued. They're arguing over my vote. Being a fan of history and being in shock, I didn't know what to do. These 2 people were sitting there, my landlord and friend, an Italian American and a Caucasian woman, are arguing over an African American's vote. And I was so stunned and so shocked of what to do, because this was the first time voting while having my loss of vision and being able to read print. I was in some type of state. I couldn't even focus what was going on. It was so overwhelming for my brain that I just shut down and listened to them fight over my ballot. So when we finally resolved that, he said, "I'm not filling out any more ballots for him." And she said, "All right," and took it, and then cast a ballot. And then we drove home in silence. And as I got home, I realized my vote had been enfranchised on. Years of fighting for voting rights, and my vote has been franchised on. I didn't vote where I wanted to. I didn't even know if he voted for what I wanted to vote for. And I swore at that moment, no one would ever vote for me again, ever. I will always make sure I vote for myself. That was my first voting experience. My second voting experience was
I just want to, before you kind of just like go on, I know when you spoke to me about it, you told me that it made you very angry.
Oh, I was furious. I was in so much. For days later, I laid in bed thinking about how my vote was taken away from me. I was so frustrated. I'm a fan of history. I study history. History is what I enjoy. And to believe that someone else infringed on my vote and took my vote, the anger I felt was beyond me. It was for me, my family, my ancestors. That's how angry I was about it was hard for me to deal with it. I got to tell you, it was really, really difficult. I knew at that point that no one will ever get a chance to vote for me. No one will choose to vote for me. And I'll be 100% sure when I cast my vote next time that I will be in control of my vote. Not an individual, not some person with their own political agenda. I'm not even sure he voted the way I wanted to. I had no idea.
Right. And I think what's really critical, just to kind of bring this back to sort of the current battles that disability rights advocates are having or have had, say, over the past 20 years since the introduction of HAVA, are those two adjectives that voters have a right to vote privately and independently. And I think they tend to get boiled down sort of to just adjectives, and people don't understand that there's a real meaning behind those, that the right to vote privately and independently is not always available, and that it has a tremendous meaning for people. So I think when I hear your story, it makes me understand more like why those words in legislation and in policy regulations that we set up are very, very important.
More than anything, the disabled community is the largest minority in America, the largest minority. And being able to vote independently, privately, and securely is key to everyone's vote, and more towards the disability community, because when we vote, it's literally life and death. We could be voting on legislation that determines our health, whether we get the proper services, whether we get services to help us look for work, whether the internet is accessible, all these things. Voting and voting awareness and voter legislation and making sure voting machines are accessible is the key to functioning as a disabled person.
Yeah. And then I will say that one of the things that I've tried to add to those two adjectives of voting privately and independently is voting securely. And when I first started to have conversations with the disability rights community, I felt like it wasn't as much of a priority, and it wasn't even necessarily that well understood. But as there's been more information about how important security is, to make sure that your vote is counted accurately, not just that it's cast accurately and you want to fill it out and make sure that the vote is what you want it to be, but that when it gets counted, the same thing happens. It gets counted accurately. And as I've developed stronger relationships with the disability rights community, I've sensed that there's been a growing awareness about that. And I know you told me, Terence, that you yourself are very personally aware of the need for security as well.
The attitude towards the disabled community is, this is what we have. The BMD, excuse me, the auto mark is what we have. So we don't have many choices. So whether we are aware of some of its security issues, but this is the machine we are using to vote. Until a better, secure machine comes along, this is what we're going to use. It's the death of choosing not to vote and be disenfranchised, or vote with what we have. And we choose to vote with what we have. That's our only choice.
I hear you. But my perspective, and I think many of the people in the security community, is that if we don't demand better, we won't get better. So you had to demand those two words first, private and independent. And I think there has to be a demand for secure also. And I happen to see if Bennie wants to jump in here. Bennie, do you want to address that at all?
Yeah, delighted to have you, Mr. Page. I've heard a lot of these concerns, especially when it comes to ballot marking devices. And the one that you're referencing, the auto mark, is the one that we in the security community gives the best security, because it's an auto mark. You literally are using that to fill out a hand marked paper ballot, and that makes your ballot the same as the request of all the other people who are voting. But it is wonderful that the independence of the disability community is now finally being heard, especially because most people just think, oh, just shove them, give a ballot marking device, or make everybody use a ballot marking device. And that's marginalizing a lot of people. But when you listen to what the disabled community wants, they want the independence. They want theirs to look like everybody else's, so that we can all be treated the same. And that, I think that has been missing from I haven't been comfortable saying it because I'm not disabled, but to hear you say it, I mean, it gives it that much more gravitas to know that somebody who does believe in their right to vote, they don't want to leave it up to anybody, and especially your story kind of hits home that you don't want to leave it up to someone else. You want the autonomy and the ability to do it yourself, and that's commendable. I love it.
I'd also like to say, Benny, I am a poll worker, and the full face ballot that is coming up on legislation, which is keeping voting machines from entering the state. We're trying to change that. That's our goal, is to allow more voting machines, more secure voting machines, more voting machines that are accessible. That's what we want. We just want to be treated just like everyone else. And we want our vote to count just like everyone else. And the BMD, or the upcoming BMD by Democracy Live or other voting systems, are the best at coming. And we look forward to meeting them, figure out how they work, testing them, all of that.
So yeah, I'll jump in here for people just to give some context. Terence has been working with a variety, like a whole coalition of disability rights groups, and also with Smart Legislation, which is our sister organization, to try to improve the legislation in New York in particular that is regulating the voting machines. And there's some sort of oddities to the New York law, and the one that he's referencing is called the full face ballot. It's something that is in almost no other states, but the New York has a requirement that whatever voting machine or ballot marking device that you use, it displays all of the candidates in one big screen the first time that the voter sees those races. And it has limited the ballot marking devices that have been able to come into the state. And it's been very contentious. I know that groups have tried to get rid of that for decades, but we are actually making progress kind of working around that. There's a couple of ballot marking devices coming into the state now that we have some hope for. The one he mentioned, the Democracy Live, has a ballot marking device, and that vendor has been very cooperative with our coalition. In fact, they've offered to let a security organization or like a white hat hacker look at their code, probably with a non-disclosure agreement, but to examine the ballot marking device's code. That's a real breakthrough. None of the vendors have done that previously, except for the one vendor that did the ranked choice voting that has open source software. That's code that you can look at, but most of the other vendors keep their code very private, like a Coca-Cola recipe, proprietary. So Democracy Live, we have more hope for that it's going to be a more secure and a more transparent process, and that vendor is hopefully going to come into New York for certification toward the end of this year. I do just want to make one quibble with you, Benny, about you said that the ballot marking device, like the auto mark, is the same as the hand marked paper ballot. It is technically a ballot, a computer marked ballot, but it marks a ballot that looks identical to the hand marked paper ballot.
Right. Then I was inarticulate. That's what I'm saying. That is the closest one that gives the autonomy of filling out a paper ballot in the same way that a regular person would use a pen to do so.
Right. And Terence, do you want to briefly just address like why it's so important that the ballot marking device ballots be identical to all the other ballots?
The BMD, for short, ballot marking device, it will, if it's not exact, it will identify the voter as being different. And we want our ballots to be exactly like everyone else. So even when the ballot is marked by the auto mark, it doesn't make the ovals perfect. It makes them different. So they
like
look
a person could have, right?
Like a person. The BMD is just a giant pen, to quote one of my friends, Kathleen Collins. Yeah, it's just a giant pen. It marks the ballot just like everyone else. So you can't determine whether this person is disabled or any of the nature of this person's disability, which is what we're seeking, a separate, equal and fair ballot that looks just like everyone else.
Exactly. And that's why, I'm sorry, go ahead, Benny.
I think that's the largest takeaway from this entire discussion. When you mark it with the auto mark, it marks it as if you marked it with a pencil. When you mark it with the $5,000 pen that you said, a giant pen, if you will, that is very different. And you can tell the difference because it's going to be marked in, the circle is going to be marked in perfectly, right? But the argument has been used against the disability community to give us all the ballot marking devices, to give us the reverse, to say, because we want to make every vote look the same, this is why we are offering you the less secure method. So it's refreshing to hear you describe it the way that we thought that it was and the way we've done so with research, but the greater public hasn't heard that come from someone who is a domain expert, right? You have the ability of living this life and walking in these shoes, and nobody's going to be able to tell you that you don't experience life the way that you do.
Thank you.
So, and I think, Bennie, do you want to just address some of the other ballot marking devices? So like the AutoMark is the type of ballot marking device that security experts recommend. As Terence said, all it does is it marks a paper ballot, and then that paper ballot is scanned on a separate device and tabulated, so that the ballot marking device is never printing and scanning. That's when you get into security risks, is when you have a machine that is both printing and tabulating. Then there's the opportunity there to actually, when you're printing the vote, to actually possibly change it, because that machine is going to be counting the vote also. So that's why the security experts recommend that the machine that prints a ballot for a voter with a disability is separate than the machine that counts the ballot. I hope that makes sense. But Bennie, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, the AutoMark, I first came into the knowledge of the AutoMark system when I was working with the Reverend Dr. T. Anthony Spearman in North Carolina with John Brakey, and they had the AutoMark, and I didn't realize that it was actually mimicking the pen strokes, right? That is a phenomenon, and it's not a newer piece of technology. So it does give you a reasonable amount of security in the sense that you're still marking a piece of paper. Once the voter is finished, the verification of that, there are disabled people who are not blind that still just want to use the paper ballot. So they don't have to be forced to a ballot marking device. That autonomy that a disabled person has, right? If I lost my legs in Vietnam, I don't need a ballot marking device. I just need a regular paper ballot. And if I can't visually see and I need some auditory assistance, then I still want to fill out a piece of paper, and that AutoMark gives you the ability to do so. So that's a phenomenal piece of technology.
And I also want to make sure it also does languages also.
It does language. Yeah, right. Yep, that's true. Yep.
But what's unfortunate about the AutoMark is that the ES&S is trying to discontinue it, even though it's really one of our favorite machines. It's an older machine, and what they'd like us to use is this new machine they call the Express Vote XL, which is much less secure and twice as expensive. And they're really trying to push that onto advocates. So we just have a few more minutes here, and then I want to, we have other guests as well, but Terence, I want you to just continue your story. There were other times that you voted, and I want to hear about some of the other times, and even if there was a time when you actually had a really great experience and felt good about voting. Do you want to share some of your other experiences with us?
I do. I want to share the 2012, I believe, when I was voting. I had moved into a different voting district, and I went to a local elementary school to vote, and I asked them for the BMD or the AutoMark, and they said, "What?" I was like, "No." I went with a friend, and they said, "Why don't you let him vote?" And I lost it. I went to a rage. I said, "It is not his job for me to vote. It's your job. You have the machine here. Turn it on and let me vote the way in an accessible format." They're looking at me, and I say, "We don't know how to use it. Turn it on and I'll use it. I don't need you. Just turn it on and I can use the AutoMark and I will vote. I don't need you guys to do that. He is not here to work for me. This is your job. Do your job." And they found an AutoMark, they pulled it out, uncovered it, turned it on, booted it, and I voted. That was my first time using the AutoMark.
Yeah. I love it. I'm with you, Terence. They trying to discontinue the BlackBerry phone. I still want the BlackBerry phone, though.
All right. So we have to move on, but it's really just been a pleasure to have you here, Terence. And if people want to find out more about you, I know I put up the website there. This is the Greater New York Council of the Blind website, Greater New York Council, gnycb.org. And are they able to contact you through that website?
They are. We meet once the first Saturday of every month. Everybody is welcome. Yes, you may reach me through that website. You can reach all of us and go on our website. And this website, we're very proud to say this website was designed, written, and produced by blind and visually impaired persons.
Wow.
And we're very proud of that. It's one of the
Now I'm
only
going there. Look, I got to pull it up.
So
I'm a coder, so I gotta see it.
And I'm going ahead and
proud of it.
I'm putting that into the chat.
Yeah, put it in the chat.
So let's take a comment here from Jean Dufort. She says, universal BMDs equal less secure elections. How do you balance that concern? So I think we're trying to make clear, but maybe we haven't, Jean, that I don't think anybody on this panel is advocating universal ballot marking devices. In fact, what Bennie has been saying repeatedly, but maybe not clearly enough, is that the universal ballot marking device, where everyone uses the universal ballot marking device, is not what security experts recommend. And what Terence was saying for his experience was that he wants to make sure that he can use the ballot marking device and that it's available to him,
yes.
and that it is something that is private and independent and secure, which the AutoMark is probably one of the most secure options for ballot marking devices, because again, it prints out a separate ballot and then that ballot is taken to a separate machine that tabulates. And that's what we understand security experts recommend, is that tabulation and printing, and remember that scanning is tabulation. When that ballot scans, it counts. You want the counting and the printing to be separate because you don't want the machine. I liken it to a self-driving car. If the car can start itself, fill itself up with gas, navigate around town and park, it doesn't need you anymore. It can do whatever it wants. So if you have a machine that can print your ballot and print your ballot, scan your ballot, count your ballot, it doesn't need you anymore. It can vote however it wants. And that is where you really get the security vulnerabilities. So that is the universal ballot marking device is not what we're recommending, Gene.
The universal ballot marking device is how the conversation has been hijacked to use the disabled community as a reason to give it. And if they're going to do it, they can put the whole country on auto marks. Then that'd be great, right? We'll fill our ballot all in the same way, but that is going to still take you away from what is being advocated by the election vendors now, which is the ballot marking device that security experts don't care for.
Right. And I think what most of us want is for there to be options. Voters who want to mark their ballot by hand deserve that option. Voters who need assistance deserve that option. So I think really we're talking about options. And I have to say, we have a question here, and I'm so glad you asked this because I meant to say this right off the bat. So Marnie is with us, and she said, it's wonderful to be here. Is there a way to activate the closed caption feature via YouTube? I'm not seeing the CC feature available as an option. Thank you. So here's what you do. You want to go and watch this on Facebook instead. I meant to say this right from the beginning. I'm so sorry that I did not. We have the closed captioning live on Facebook. And so the link for Facebook, just give me 1 second. I will pull up the Facebook link here. If you go to this link, I'm going to put this into the chat. This is for closed caption, watch on Facebook. And there are even instructions on how to activate your closed caption system on Facebook. And I'm going to put that link into the chat also. So let me just see. This is it right now. How do I turn on captions on for video on Facebook? And I'm going to put that into the chat. And I think I can even possibly bring that up for a second and show you how to set that up. I'm so sorry that I didn't mention it right when we started. So this is the page on Facebook. I just put the link into the chat. And let's see, are you seeing that? There, how do I turn on captions for Facebook? So if you go to that link that I put in the chat, it tells you, you go into your settings and it's very simple. You're just gonna click it the closed captioning into on, and then you're going to go and click on the other link and watch the show on Facebook, and you'll get your closed captions there. So the other thing that it would be great for us to do that we haven't done yet is to give some video descriptions for, or audio descriptions for those who cannot see. And I'll go first. I'm a Caucasian woman, and I just got my hair cut, so it has a little bit of a curl. It's kind of long brown hair, and I have a pretty big smile that I try to share. And I'm in my home studio, and I have a brick wall behind me. I live in a house from 1910, and this is the original brick wall behind me. And then I'm going to let our ASL interpreter go next. And are you able to do an audio description, Lisa, or is it too complicated?
I can in a moment. Just give me a second.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lisa Dennett. I'm a middle-aged female with light brown skin, long brown hair that is brushed up. I'm wearing glasses and a black short-sleeved shirt behind a blue background.
Wonderful. And Benny, can you give us an audio description?
I've never done this before. I'm about to butcher this. All right, so I am a middle-aged black male. I'm graying in the top a little bit. Look like I need to shave, and I'm going to. I am sitting in my home office, and there are 6 computer screens behind me because I'm auditioning to be a correspondent for the White House. So the background is a picture of Washington, D.C., and that's it.
Terence, do you want to give us an audio description?
Sure, I'm Terence Page. I'm 6 foot tall. I'm wearing a white button-down shirt, dark-skinned African American. Behind me are my guitars. I'm surrounded by like 4 guitars behind me.
Okay.
Wonderful. Terence is a musician. Okay, so we have 2 more guests, and I wanted to say thank you so much to Terence. It's really been wonderful to have you with
Terence.
us. We really,
Thank you for
really
having me.
appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I thank you for allowing me to express the values of my organization, and that disabled people, I just want to say that all disabled people have the right to vote freely, independent, and without influence or any kibitzing from anyone else. They express their own ideas. So, but you can't do that unless you have the information and the knowledge to vote for
Right.
yourself. So fight for it. Fight for your right to vote.
Right.
Beautiful, really beautiful. So I want to introduce you next to Keith, and this is Keith Gurgui. And
You got it.
I worked on that one. And Keith, do you want to go ahead and give us an audio description to start?
Sure. I'm 30-year-old Caucasian male with black glasses. I'm wearing a white t-shirt, and behind me is a map of the world and my little degrees and a door.
Thank you so much. And Keith is a systems advocate. Get your information up here. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your work?
Yep, so I'm the systems advocate at the Resource Center for Accessible Living in Kingston, New York. We're one of the many independent living centers across New York State. Our primary goal is to help individuals with disabilities of any age and any disability live in the community as independently as possible. And so we are a result of the deinstitutionalization movement from the 70s. And of course, we push for accessibility and integration, accessible education, employment, housing, healthcare, etc.
Yeah, that's incredible that you're doing all that work. And if people want to follow you on Twitter, you are, this is your organization on Twitter, and it's Arcal, is how you guys say that? Arcal?
Yep.
Okay. So that's on Twitter, and this is the website, and I'll go ahead and put that website into the chat. So if people want to check that out, they can. I found all of your websites to be really informative. There's wonderful amount of information there. So I do encourage people to go ahead and check out these websites as well. So go ahead and, if you would, just tell us a little bit about your story and kind of your history, how you came to be part of the disability community. Like, what happened?
Right, definitely. So, like I said, I'm 30 years old now. I was introduced to the world of disability just 3 months after graduating high school in 2009. During vacation at Delaware after graduation, I suffered a spinal cord injury at Bethany Beach, just kind of running and jumping into the ocean head first. And that rendered me paralyzed from the neck down. And after, the ICU and moving up to Helen Hayes in New York for 6 months of rehab, I learned all about Social Security and Medicaid and ADA requirements and education services for individuals with disabilities, because I was set to go to Philadelphia University for a 5-year physician assistance program. So and then I was 18 for 3 months, so I had not voted yet. So voting, accessibility became an issue, and kind of things unfolded year after year. I got more politically active as I learned, my reliance on government services just became extremely active.
Yeah, I think it's just so important for all of us to remember that any of us could become a voter with a disability at any time. Like, just in an instant, your life changed. And what was that like for you, just to wake up and have like a completely different life?
Well, obviously at the time is much different than now. I'm used to life as it is, but I didn't previously think about spinal cord injury or the world of disability and all that it requires and entails and its history until it took time to really understand the systems that you need to navigate, and these are different for everyone based on their disability and where they live and maybe their income. It's a complex world we live in. So I don't know. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of my story.
I don't want to rabbit hole, but I think it's important for people to understand. I mean, there must have been a period of shock and disbelief and a whole variety of emotions that I can only imagine what you went through in that transition. I mean, you're such a mature, talented, and effective individual now. Like, when you were telling me about your headset and all the things that it does, I'd love, for you to share that with people. But it must have been a journey for you to get there. That I'm just saying that emotion when you first came into this world must have been very powerful.
Yes, and it happens to many young men. Spinal cord injury is very common, where like the plurality of injuries is young men, but it's a big, I don't know, it's been so long, it's been over 12 years, so I'm very kind of forward looking. I tend not to dwell on the past. Even in politics, you kind of have to get over losses and move forward and try to be as impactful as possible as an advocate. So it pairs well with my reality.
Yeah. Tell us about your headset and how it works.
Right, so because of my level of injury, I drive my wheelchair with my head. And so I have a power button that clicks on here, and then the other is a mode switch that I can tap. And then based on what mode I'm in, the back of my headrest that I just normally lie on is the, forward or reverse. I can change it, and then, or I can tilt. So there's actually 1, 2, 3 touch pads, and then there's 2 click buttons that are power and mode switches, which is similar to how I use the BMD. I use a sip and puff straw, but you can also use switches similar to this depending on your level of injury and what you need to use.
And tell us some of your experiences in terms of voting. I know it has not always gone well.
Yes, so before the pandemic, I would go to the polls, not far from my house. It's like a mile up the road at the firehouse. From architectural barriers, because of the wheelchair, there's a lip at the accessible entryway that's probably larger than it should be. I have a motorized wheelchair, so it's not a problem for me to just sort of ram it and get up it. But if you were on a manual, it would be difficult. The door has been locked, and I've needed someone else to knock on it because I clearly can't knock. And then when I'm in the polls, it's the BMD. Depending on who's working that day, I might need to explain what gets plugged in where, how to initiate the setting, the voting session rather. And because I'm using the sip and puff, that needs to be plugged into one remote, and the remote needs to be plugged into the machine. And then that sip and puff needs to be mounted on a part of the wheelchair so it's close to my mouth. And so all these things need to work together, and the ballot printer needs to work, and the display. So yes, I've had problems with all of those, or separately and together at times.
I mean, you've told me that almost every single one of those individual items has not worked at one time or another.
Yeah, and I, unlike Terence and many others, we use in Ulster County where I am, we use the Dominion image cast. So
And
there's a difference there.
Has that been a positive experience?
Not exactly. I mean, it's cumbersome. So depending on my mood, if I've eaten, sometimes I won't use the ballot marking device, and I'll just have my dad or my caregiver, whoever's with me at the time, I'll tell them, fill in that candidate, and then they give it to the poll worker, or they put it in the scanner.
What would you say is the most frustrating thing about the Dominion image cast?
Time, assembly time, and then the potential for mishaps in any of those linkages, whether it's the sip and puff to the electronics, the sip and puff mounting, the headset that speaks the session to you and reads out the candidates while you're looking at the display, and then you sip and puff through the straw, which is a tedious process because it's just two inputs that it has, so one sip and one puff, so you have to kind of be methodical in your decision, and then going back and fixing if there's a mistake takes time. So time, it's a lengthy process if you really want to go through it.
And have you been on systems that are designed better? Is there better design?
Well, just because of the nature of where I live, I have not lived anywhere else before, so I've always been local. So it's been at the firehouse up the road, and then for school elections, it's been the same school. So it's always been the Dominion machine.
But I just mean, like, you must work on other sip and puff applications. I'm just wondering if, in general, sip and puff applications might be a little bit more advanced than the one on the Dominion image cast.
I know of them. I don't want to speak for them. I know that I'm not much of an artist, but I do have friends that do art with a special joystick controller for the computer, which uses sip and puff inputs. So it can mimic like spray and brush strokes depending on the pressure of that you apply with the straw. But I actually, because of my head control, I use my head more often. There are wheelchair users who need to use a sip and puff because they may have more paralysis in their neck and be on a ventilator. I'm a C4 quadriplegic, so luckily I have control of my diaphragm and I can kind of shrug my shoulders, but that's where it cuts off.
So it sounds like your friends can actually draw with sip and puff. So the design, the technological capability is there. They could make the machines more, they could do a better job.
Yes, it's like technology and science. There's a lot of potential. So I definitely believe that we can have access, private and secure, independent voting for people with disabilities. It's a matter of time and a matter of prudence and activism.
We can do better.
Yes.
And if you had sort of like one thing that you're especially pushing for in terms of improvements for voters with disabilities, what would you say it is?
Well, since the pandemic, we have luckily been able to request absentee ballots online, which is helpful. Obviously, I have what's called or has been referred to as a print disability, so physical paralysis gets in the way of writing. So I'm able to fill out my absentee ballot as a fillable PDF. At that time, then I need to print it, fold it, and mail it, and I can't do the manual tasks. So it's not completely independent and private, but it is more than a hand-marked paper ballot. I can at least make my choice of candidates and initiatives or whatever's on the ballot. Select it, press print, know that that's what it is, and then it gets mailed.
Right. So you still do need some help. And we had questions about that in the chat. They wanted to know about mail-in ballots. So you did vote with a mail-in ballot in this last election during the pandemic, right?
Yeah, it's electronic receipt of the ballot to me in PDF form, and then I'm responsible for printing it and mailing it back to the Board of Elections, which is, it's a part of the process of trying to make it more accessible and independent.
Right.
But we have a ways to go.
Yeah, well, I know on this forum, we definitely do not support for the ballot itself to be emailed back, because that would be a real severe security risk. But I know that that's a point in contention, and that there are disability rights groups that very much want to be able to email their ballot back. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that.
And it's not necessarily email. I mean, there are other modes of electronic communication. So I don't want to get into the weeds too much. I don't think email's the secure way. And I'm definitely not a coder and a computer guy, but whether it's a government portal or some sort of encrypted technology that maybe we don't have right now. But it's a little bit of the cart before the horse, in a sense that maybe if we had an electronic means of voting, the security bugs would be dealt with in time. Maybe it could be started as like a game or voting for races, something, and not used in government systems. I don't know how, but I believe the future is interesting.
Yeah, Bennie, do you want to weigh in on that at all?
Systems advocate, can you tell me when you're saying you are someone who is looking at the current way that your slate of disabilities can be serviced, and you are advocating, I guess your organization is advocating for input with those types of systems. Am I thinking about that correct?
Yeah, so the title comes from the grant, which is the Statewide Systems Advocacy Network, but I think of it as advocacy towards systems as a whole, kind of the education system, or the way states subsidize housing, or the electoral system. Yeah,
so some of these vendors, you're the perfect person that some of these vendors need to hear, right? They don't have to have 100,000 of these. They should have one that can get it right, or two or three that can get it right. I think we probably should make some phone calls. You really explained something very technical, that if someone just listens to it and how you reason with it, it's actually not as complex as it seems. You can get a stand to hold 40 different devices. So having a mountable rack for your chair should be something that is very simple, right? A telescopic wand that allows you to either control that some kind of way, or some type of joystick. There is already technology that can handle some of these things. I didn't know what Sip and Puff was, but that sounds like that one already works in other. You send people playing games, and painting. That sounds like Lulu said. That's pretty accessible. So I think that the disabled community has not been heard when it comes to technology, not because they're an afterthought. I think because vendors have figured out that they already know the solution, and they're just saying, "What? Here's this one little device, and everybody will fit into that little box, and it doesn't work."
I think, yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement, definitely. I want to get our last guest on, Tasha, and we have, so I just want to say thanks so much to Keith for being with us.
Thank you, Keith.
It's really wonderful of you to share your story and your work and the work of Terence and Tasha, all of you. Is very inspiring to me. So I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks. Happy to join.
Okay, and if people want to follow up with you, can they contact you through the website?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Keith.
And then we have a couple notes to deal with from people, and I want to get these on here. This is something for us to be aware of, Bennie, in reference to Bennie's usage of the word regular people when discussing the non-disabled community. Aren't we all regular people? I find the phrase regular people offensive. So we all just need, I don't know. I didn't catch it, but obviously someone did. We just all need to be really
incredibly inarticulate if I said that.
Conscious of our vocabulary. I usually use the term voters with disabilities or individuals with disabilities, and sometimes I'll say disability, the non-disability community, or I think, as long as I think all of us can think about ways just to be really sensitive to these issues. And Mark also had a really pretty amazing comment. This is from Mark Shaw. Waking up disabled for me was like taking a snow globe and flipping it upside down and shaking the heck out of it and trying to swim to the top. So I think that's pretty descriptive there. So I want to bring on Tasha. We just have a few minutes, but her story is so moving. So let's get her in here. Tasha, thank you so much for joining us and for your patience.
No problem. Thank you for having me here.
It's great to have you here. So Tasha, do you want to do an audio description?
I'm African American. I have very short hair and long earrings, wearing a green shirt with a black sweater.
And just tell us a little bit about your work now.
Right now, I'm a voting access organizer and trainer at the Center for Independence of the Disabled, New York. I do a lot of outreach, reaching out to people and trying to have our organizations work together to do. I also try to reach out to a lot of, as many consumers as possible to get them registered to vote. If they have any questions about voting, they can contact us, but especially for those that are hesitant about voting. I have come across some, who feel like, what's the point? And, every vote counts. It does not matter whether you're disabled or not. Every vote counts.
And I think one of the things that really became clear to me from hearing your story is just that there are real reasons why someone with a disability might be hesitant to go to the polls, might feel scared, and had even had a potentially traumatizing experience that would prevent them. So go ahead and just tell us a little bit about your background and your health issues.
Well, when I was 7 years old, when I was diagnosed with epilepsy, I have what's known as complex partial seizures. Key term being complex, because although it's partial, I could, unfortunately, at present, I can no longer sense them coming. I used to be able to sense it, and I would have enough time to warn someone with me or, take a seat, prepare myself. Unfortunately, at present, I can't.
So tell us for somebody who might not know what epilepsy is, do you want to just define that and let them know?
Epilepsy, it's a neurological brain disorder. So I've, as I said, I've had it from a very young age for over 20 years. And what was difficult for me, I'd say, is that after numerous surgeries and a lot of medications, unfortunately, I still have it. It's still not fully under control. But the hardest thing for me was when it got worse back in 2007. And I was having it multiple times during the daytime. And at the time I got injured, I'd fall down and injure myself. And it pushed me to the point where I was just scared to leave the house. I couldn't go. I was too scared to leave the house. And if I did, it would have to be with my father or my mother.
And so at that time, you definitely needed a ballot mailed to you, something that you could vote at home.
Yeah. Although I did, when voting, I didn't have the ballot sent to me, but I did have my father went with me. We stood online together, and even though I was still scared, but I felt, okay, my father's with me, so I'm okay. But yeah, I never had the ballot. My mother, she does the absentee voting, but even last year I didn't do absentee ballot.
You went in person.
Yeah,
it means a lot to you, I guess.
Yeah, especially last year, both my father and I had asked him. I was like, "Are you gonna do absentee vote?" He's like, "No." Yeah, he's like, "No, I'm gonna stand online." So we both agreed. Okay, yes, let's stand on. Let's leave home early. We left home we thought extremely early, but apparently didn't seem to be early enough.
Yeah.
The line went all the way around the building, but also because of my fatigue, unfortunately, from a lot of the medication that I take. And especially after having a seizure, I get very tired. So unfortunately, I couldn't stand online as long as it was too long for me.
And you told me there was no line manager there. There was no one to kind of bring people forward who were having difficulty.
I didn't notice, no.
And I think that's one of the things that I've heard emphasized repeatedly is that we really need the poll worker training. We need for poll workers to be more aware of these issues. We definitely need line managers, people who are trained to, as you've heard during this hour, trained on how the ballot marking devices work, where they are, how to turn them on, how to help people use them. We need better ballot marking devices, better training, and more assistance and more awareness overall for people with disabilities.
Yes, most definitely. And, something that I felt, because I lived in the Bronx at the time, and I don't know, I just kind of felt like, the Bronx always seems to be left behind in certain things, but, that's what we advocate. That's what advocacy is for. It's for better treatment, better, that's the reason, the whole point of voting, the opportunity to vote. You have to vote for someone who you believe can provide you with the things that you need.
And when you've been able to vote, how have you felt about it?
Oh, I always felt satisfied. Always felt satisfied being able to get there. Whether, now I can go by myself. And, even though I still have epilepsy, and I still, unfortunately now I can't tell when it's coming, but I don't let it scare me. I don't let it scare me to, keep me, afraid to stay at home. No, I have to vote, so I will vote.
That's awesome. We're going to have to end. We need to end on time so that we don't overtax Lisa. But it's been just so wonderful to have you here. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your story.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay. I think that is what we have time for. That's our forum for today. We did not really have time to do our normal fundraising that we do, but I assure you our need for fundraising has not gone away. So please, I will go ahead and put that real quickly into the chat. If you, out of the goodness of your heart, would like to make a donation or send our information to somebody who you think might be interested in supporting us, you can see here we're doing work that is unique, relevant, and necessary. And I do encourage you to support us and have your friends support us. And I just want to thank all of our guests once more. We really, really appreciate all of their being here and telling their stories. And I hope that they've inspired you and that you will, one of the main missions of Smart Elections is to build bridges and reach out and connect these communities, the security community and disability rights community. We all need to be really working together to improve our elections as a whole. So build those bridges, reach out. If you're in an election security group, go connect with disability rights advocates in your community, vice versa. If you're in the disability rights community, go seek out an election security group and make that connection. We all want to work together. Thank you again so much. And Bennie?
Be sure to check us out. I think we're back in 2 weeks. It's October the 5th. Also, if you want to catch up, I spoke to a very prominent person in the election integrity community, and she said, "Where do I find all of these videos you're talking about?" And I said, all you have to do is go to our YouTube page and look at all the prior videos. So we encourage everybody who's just joining with us or want to know how we've had so many domain experts and what we've been talking about to go and look at some of those videos.
Fantastic. And I'm putting all of those links into the chat where you can find the playlist on YouTube with all the videos and signing up for the next forum on October 5th. And just remember, this is what democracy looks like.